Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about something demo related, which I'm surprised I even still have things to talk about on this class. So recently North America has been kind of embroiled with the loch-n-load, and it's become a very popular weapon choice. And, you know, it is very strong, and I have been a fan of the loch-n-load for a very long time, for all the reasons I've outlined multiple times, whether that be, you know, that what is Demo's best unlock video, or, you know, this dedicated loch-n-load video I have. So I'm not going to rehash that, but I do want to talk about rollers and talk about how strong they are, because it's very easy to understate the power of rollers when you look at a weapon like the loch-n-load. And a lot of the time, many of the things that rollers do for you are not as flashy, and they don't stand out as much as a cross-map pipe would. So I do just want to talk about rollers, how they're just kind of broken and help you in so many different ways. So yeah, let's just get started with it. So for starters, oh, actually, I do know I'm running stock on this map. Most of what I'm saying applies more so to Iron Bomber, but of course stock has rollers still, so obviously some of it still does, but they're just less consistent. The reason I'm using stock on Metalworks here, partly just vibes. I just like using new things, and also because I like the range component of it that it has over Iron Bomber. But anyway, so we want to talk about rollers. So for starters, obviously the most obvious benefit of rollers are the fact that you just get chip damage with them. Sometimes it's random, like with something like stock pipes, a lot of the time it is kind of random. And this randomness can help you or hurt you, because sometimes a stock roller will literally just chase a target who by all means should have dodged it. But in the case of Iron Bomber, it's usually pretty consistent, and missed pipes can often get some reliable roller damage, which is extremely valuable. I mean, just being able to hit someone for another, you know, 30 to 40 damage, that's absolutely useful, and why would you not want that? Extremely strong. But where it becomes, like, so helpful, in my opinion, is when it's in the fact that pipes can kind of burst damage with themselves. It's like self-bursting, where you can miss a pipe but have the roller sitting there and then hit the next pipe, and suddenly the two of them does like 140 damage. And sometimes this chains together with like two rollers in a pipe, and it just straight up kills a player that by all means shouldn't have died otherwise. And being able to apply burst damage in particular is something that Demo is good at, and being able to do that with just pipes is really useful, and targets that, you know, are taking that engagement with you, you know, assuming they have a certain amount of health, and seeing the fact that you haven't fired a sticky necessarily, knowing that they aren't at risk of getting sticky synced, aren't expecting to randomly just take 150 damage and die, right? So that self-bursting component of the roller damage is really useful. And again, it's not consistent. It's not something you can consistently set up. You'd rather just hit every pipe than have any miss and be rollers. But you're not going to hit every pipe. You never will. And having consistent roller damage is really, really nice for those missed shots. Another useful component is just the fact that rollers, particularly Iron Bomber rollers, are just fantastic tools outside of strictly dealing damage. Like, if, for instance, you want to, you know, peek something, peek a door, but there's stickies, like a sticky carpet, blocking you, and you have traps up for whatever reason, basically you don't want to use a sticky to clear them, well, now you have access to rollers to do so. So you could have your own carpet up somewhere and still be able to clear the enemy stickies. Or if, you know, there's an entanglement of sticks somewhere, and if you det, a bunch are going to get knocked into you, and you don't really want to do that, boom, you just shoot a roller on the side of the carpet that you want it to go away from. Horrible phrasing. You know, you just play to knock it around, and suddenly, boom, you are now free to peek this. And being able to clear sticks and just use it as a tool in that regard is a really helpful asset of having those rollers. And another aspect is being able to pipe jump as well. I mean, this is most common on... I see it most often on Gully Wash 2nd, I feel, where you want to enter lobby through river, generally. It's usually safer. They can't have a sniper, of course, but whatever. You want to enter lobby through river a lot of the time. And you also want to have traps on shutter, and you usually trap shutter when you're entering the point. You don't always route all the way up on top of point, so you want to jump up to river. If you want to do so without giving up your traps, then it's just an easy pipe jump. But being able to just pipe jump in general is a good way to get around the map somewhat faster, and especially access height that you wouldn't have otherwise accessed without having to give up traps, which again, just really useful utility that you don't really get otherwise without those rollers. Another aspect that is nice, and this one is a little less relevant for most demos, but being able to use pipes to build Uber. So of course, you know, demos traditionally use the half Zatoichi to build Uber, and it is perfectly sufficient at that. But there are some pretty noticeable downsides to the Zatoichi, which is the fact that it's two-handed, which means it takes a long time to pull out. And while, you know, melee as a demo is really not that relevant of a weapon, you rarely use your melee for anything. When you do want to use your melee is specifically in those moments where you there's a player who's only going to be within your melee range for like a fraction of a moment, because of course classes playing against the demo usually like to close the gap and get as close as possible, because not only is it easier to dodge demo's projectiles if you're exceptionally close or exceptionally far away, but not mid-range, for a multitude of reasons. Like one of them being like if you're very close to someone or very close to a demo, you can actually react to where the sticky's fired and get out of that location by the time it's even armed. So much easier to take close range engagements with demo, on top of the fact that they do self-damage to themselves. So yeah, a lot of scouts in particular will really like to close the gap, but they're usually only in melee range for a moment. And you know, if you pick a random timing to pull out your melee and hold S or hold W into them for a second, you can oftentimes get a melee hit off if you're using something like stock or the pain train or any of the stock reskins that pull out faster and quit faster. Versus the half Zatoichi, it's a lot harder to do that. So in general, when it comes to the situations you'd want to use a melee as a demo, just to secure that tiny bit of damage that you really need on that player that's trying to close the gap, usually a scout, the melee can be surprisingly effective. And you see demos that run stock melee. I mean, like, you know, shoutouts to Panny. You see Banny like get picks with his pan, his trusty sidearm. It's not a common occurrence, of course, because again, demo melees are just not a common weapon to be seeing used effectively, because again, just niche. But it's something, and you notice that when you have the half Zatoichi. So being able to build with rollers rather than the Zatoichi frees you up to use whatever melee you want, whether you want Pain Train for the extra cap time, or you just want the bottle because you don't want to mess around with any bullet vulnerability with the Pain Train and don't really like the slow draw of the Zatoichi. So again, being able to use rollers to build Uber, again, just extra utility out of the weapon, and another reason why rollers are really strong. And the last thing I want to talk about is something that really doesn't get brought up at all in the conversation with rollers, even though it's huge. And it wasn't something that I really keyed into back when I used Iron Bomber consistently, and it wasn't until I started returning to the weapon recently that I kind of keyed into it. And it relates to how you hold doors. So obviously as a demo you want to be holding the doors, and you do this by spamming it with sticks and pipes. But this is something that it's tough to do against a lot of pressure because you don't have that much ammo loaded. Well, you have a lot of ammo loaded, but it's slow to reload, and especially against prolonged amounts of pressure, you just need to pick timings to reload. And a lot of the time that if the other team is really trying to pressure and trying to get through, then they might be able to take some space because you just straight up don't have anything loaded. And if it's a really high level team as well, then you can play off of the fact that their demo has nothing loaded. Like, you can key into that and play for that fact, whether you just count their shots or, I don't know, just any of the ways to approach that. But again, you can, the other team's demo not having something loaded is something you can just straight up push off of, which is part of the reason why I think you know, a weapon like the quickie bombs are extremely easy to play against in a stalemate or a transition or something, because you can just kind of play off their demo not having ammo. But whatever, I'll leave the quickie bomb hate to the side for now. So where do rollers come into play here? Well, what's so nice about Iron Bomber is the fact that if you need to reload a couple sticks to properly hold a choke, you shoot a pipe at the choke without even necessarily seeing anyone there, and that roller is enough to prevent someone from peeking for long enough for you to reload a sticky or something. So you are able to use that kind of prolonged roller, because again, if you just shoot a pipe, a lot of the time, if there's like a scout playing, and I'm thinking specifically in terms of like process choke right now, where there can be a scout kind of obscured around the corner or something like that, so it's difficult to, so you don't really see them, but they're just kind of playing to clear your sticks and potentially take some space. If you just shoot a sticky, then as soon as that scout can react and aim, that sticky's going to get shot and deleted. But a pipe can't get shot and deleted by a scout, meaning for the full duration that that roller exists, they're not really going to want to walk over it. Otherwise, they're just taking guaranteed damage, and even though, you know, you could make the argument that in certain situations that's worth it, no one's going to do that, because you're not making measured calculations over whether, you know, the 40 chip damage that you're taking, 40 or more chip damage that you're taking, is actually like a calculated risk that's worth the trade. No, you see roller, you don't step forward. It's that simple. So being able to use rollers as a means to just stave off pressure for the duration of that pipe and potentially reload some sticks, just makes holding a choke so much easier. And that's something that I think is really, really understated with the Iron Bomber. It's just so nice. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about having that fourth pipe, because you notice it for sure. It's really nice. But it doesn't have the same, it's a more nuanced thing, right? You just tend to have an extra pipe versus a lot of the things I've talked about here. The other uses for rollers and the other benefits of rollers are kind of more apparent. They're easier to suss out. But anyway, yeah, rollers are insanely broken and insanely helpful to have. Part of the reason why Iron Bomber is so good is those consistent rollers. And yeah, there's so many different reasons why, including but not limited to just the utility of them for building, jumping, doing whatever. That reliable chip damage that very hard to understate, just free damage that can kind of burst and chain together with itself to get crazy picks. And then, of course, being able to just buy that time when you're trying to hold a point while limited on ammo. It's subtle, but once you go back to rollers after not using them for a while, you're like, wow, I can just do this now. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. You know, all of Demo's grenades are fantastic. And also, this is not like a lock isn't broken video. This is completely unrelated to the lock-n-load. It's just, I wanted to talk about some of the extra utility you can get out of rollers that don't necessarily get talked about as much. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed, and, oh, are we going to win? Are we going to win? It's so close. And, oh, look at that. Okay, I'll see you guys next time.